Hello, and welcome to our program, Astronomy for Everyone. The topic for this month's show is a review of our top 10 shows by viewer views over the last 15 years. And here to discuss these shows with me are two of our team members, Ken Anderson and Stephen Whitty. All right, so here we go. Our first show, number 10, was episode 171, The Backyard Observatory Build, which was just this last September by our own team member, Sean Pickard.
So his observatory was pretty large. It was 10 feet by 12 feet. It's 120 square foot. There's a sky shed with 4 piers. And he had his first light on February 1st after he got all the cables and Ethernet all set up. The one thing that I think is amazing about it is he has it set up with 2 piers for imaging, and he can sleep while it's doing automatic imaging, and he pre-programs the computer, and if it gets cloudy, it stops and it closes up the roof, and if the weather sensors say that it is clear, it reopens and it starts all over again, or picks up where it left off. And make sure you check out Sean Pickard's gallery website so you can see the images that he actually does.
Focused on Infinity on Facebook. All righty, well, show number 9 was actually a tie. First, we'll start with episode 1, the very first one we did. Back in June of '09, it was on naked eye observing. And Stephen, I know you were involved with that one.
Oh, absolutely. You and I talked about this. We were standing up because chairs hadn't been invented yet. And and we talked about the cheapest way to get into astronomy, which is no equipment. You use the Mark 1 1x7 or 1x6.5 eyeballs that you have, right?
Right.
And you do naked eye observing, and you look at things that are pretty bright. The planets, most of the planets are visible. Uranus and Neptune. I've seen Uranus naked eye. That's not common. But Neptune, you need binoculars. But everything else you can see. And then there are other objects. I've seen Andromeda Galaxy naked eye.
Oh, sure, sure.
But back here, we didn't talk about looking at galaxies. We were talking about fairly easy things, looking at stars, looking at constellations, navigating, and so on.
Right, we did talk about wayfinding using the stars, and also we brought up the idea of star parties.
Sure.
Since that is an integral part of what our club is involved in.
And I brought up that you could, for free, go to a club star party and somebody will show you stuff in their expensive equipment. And you can keep doing that. You don't have to join the club. People join clubs anyway. I did.
And so things you can see with your naked eye that you mentioned were the moon, meteors, constellations, stars, the Milky Way, open star clusters such as the Hyades, the Pleiades, the Beehive, the double cluster, Mel 1-1, galaxies such as Andromeda, the M33, which is the pinwheel, right?
Right.
And the bright planets, Venus, Mars, Mercury, and Saturn, Jupiter.
Yep, that was a great episode. The other show that was tied for the number 9 spot was episode 50 from July of 2013, where Ken, you and I went out to interview Eric Webster at Webster Telescope.
Eric is a good friend of mine, and we did a lot of observing together. And so he has telescopes that he makes up from 14.5 inches up to the 40-inch big Dobbs and larger. He uses Zambutu, Kennedy Optics, Lockwood mirrors. He's able to make custom scopes down to f2.5, f3 for short focal lengths. And
as I recall, they're all truss mount style.
They're all truss mount, and he can make them go to
that I found interesting, the fact that he was able to incorporate the go-to, or in this case, push-to technology to help you find objects.
Yeah, and so like I observed with him a lot, and he always takes his scopes out and tries them out before he gives them to the customer. really good show.
Next, episode 8, or the 8th most popular show, I should say, is episode 105 from February of 2018. And Stephen, this was the show, again, that you were involved with on Planet 9, which, as I recall, is not Pluto.
It isn't. Right. So you were the host, I was the guest, and Planet 9 was it still hasn't been discovered, right? So we don't
So this is all just speculation.
yeah, right. We have some evidence that it should exist or it might exist, and it's been looked for with the Subaru telescope, an 8.4-inch telescope in Hawaii. It's got a relatively wide field of view for scopes that size, and so on. They got several weeks of time on it, and they didn't find it. One of the suggestions is that if it's out there, then it's hiding in the Milky Way and is really tough to bring out. I mean, it's got to be very faint, but we expect it to be visible. In the show, the large survey, the LSST, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, which has now been renamed the Vera Rubin, that would eventually be come out, and they were in fact building it at the time, but it hasn't been finished yet. It's expected to come online next year, 2025, and it will be magnitude 25 depth. So if it's out there, it should find it.
By calculation, they know where it, quote unquote, should be.
They have eliminated enormous amounts of the orbit, and therefore where it should track on the sky. So they've eliminated quite a bit of where it could possibly be.
Oh, that's good. So hopefully when Vera Rubin comes online, we'll be good to go. Our 7th most popular show was episode 90 that played back in November of 2016. And for this one, Stephen, you were the host, talking to Mike Simonson from the AAVO.
The AAVSO. So it's the American Amateur Variable Star Observers, and it's an old organization, 1911. It's been around for a long time, right?
Sure.
So it's over 100 years, and they're looking at stars that vary in brightness. They're easy to spot. You can even do some naked eye variable star observing. I found that to be amazing. But usually you use a telescope, and Mike would sit there at the telescope, and he would have a 1-minute timer. He had a clock that you could tell when the next minute was. And he would do a new observation every minute for like an hour. And I figured it out. If he had 200 observing nights a year, and he did an hour a night, it would still be over 8 years. It would be like almost 9 years of doing this observing. And he did, 95,000 observations. It's just ridiculous.
And they spent a majority of the first half of that show talking about cataclysmic variables. And
I
think that was his specialty, as I recall.
Yeah.
Right.
So
but it was his at the time of the show, there was the Z campaign. The Z-cam is a cataclysmic variable type, but a subtype, and they discovered that the type, there were a lot of stars that were categorized as this type that weren't in fact this type. Anyway, so they did real science with it. It was really cool.
The 6th most popular show was episode 70 that aired in March of 2015. Our guest was Ken Burton from the Warren Astronomical Society, and he gave a talk on Edmund Hawley. Now, he talked about his life and times, and his main interest, or one of his main interests anyway, was comets.
The Halley's Comet, or Comet Halley, had been seen multiple times through history already, but people didn't know that it was the same comet. And Edmund Halley said that it was a repeating comet. It comes around every 76 years or so, and when it comes around again, if it comes around when I've calculated that it'll come on, could you please name it after me?
And they did.
And they
Yeah,
did.
yes.
So, but yeah, he was a great guy. He was wealthy. He funded Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica, which is calculus, without which we'd have had somebody else's calculus.
And he also convinced Newton to publish it, because
Right.
he didn't
Well,
really
part of
wanna-
it
wanna
was
publish.
Newton didn't have the money to do it.
Exactly where Hawley did. Plus, Hawley was also instrumental in developing star charts for the southern hemisphere, which were sketchy at best. So
Yeah, he became in charge of the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, and
He was the second one at
the second
at
one, sure.
Flamstead.
And when he talked to when he talked to the first director,
Flamstead?
yeah, so he said, hey, I'm interested in the southern hemisphere because the charts there are terrible, and so that was one of the things that he ended
off
up
he
doing.
went.
Yeah.
If you have a question, please send us an email. The address is down at the bottom of your screen. And coming up next is Term with Stephen, and after that, we'll be right back with our final group of best ever shows.
Thanks, Don. The term of the month is Saturnian ring crossing. The moons Janus and Tethys are against fairly flat rings seen from the Cassini spacecraft. A Saturn ring crossing is when the rings of Saturn are edge-on as seen from Earth. When this happens, they seem to disappear, which happens because they are so thin. Crossings happen between 13 and 15 years apart. There's an equal chance of a single crossing or a triple crossing. Triple crossings happen because the Earth is moving and can cross the plane of Saturn's rings more than once, and they always do it either once or 3 times. Saturn had a ring crossing September 4th, 2009, about 5 months after this show started. The next one is March 23rd, 2025. That's next year. It's about a year. Though Saturn will be very close to the Sun next year, unfortunately. Both are single crossings. Saturn's orbit takes 29.4475 Earth years, so 29 and a half years. This show has made it to half a Saturn year old. And that's the term of the month, Saturnian ring crossing. Back to you, Don.
Thanks, Stephen, and welcome back. We're talking about our top 10 shows over the last 15 years of Astronomy for Everyone. So we'll get back into it with show number 5. That was episode 103 that aired back in December of 2017. It was the Binocular Update with Ken.
Yeah, so that was a good show. It was our third binocular show, and I have on display on the table some of the binoculars that I used during the eclipse. These were used in that show. So starting off with these are all the Galileans, and we used it for the corona, seeing the corona and the prominences. So we had the Kzi 2.3 to 40. That's 28 28 degrees field of view. We had the Vixen 2.1 by 42, which is also good for meteor showers. The next set is a handmade one that's 2 by 50, and this is 3 by 70. So we did use those, and then I also had my 100 millimeter binoculars, and I used the solar filter here for the white light filter. And in the show, I also had 25 by 100, 3.5 degree binoculars, and right angle binoculars, and I had my Garrett optical monopod tilting stick.
That's one of the things that you did talk about, both the monopod and a tripod, depending upon the size of the binoculars that you were going to use. So I think that was very helpful for our viewers as well to bring that up. Because some of those bigger units can get awful heavy awful quick.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah,
and
they
you got to
can.
worry about stabilization of the binos. That's why it was on a tripod.
Exactly, exactly. The fourth most popular show was episode 91 that aired in December of 2016. And this is one of my personal favorites. It was the show on meteorites and tektites with our guest Sandra Masika. Now, she went over all the different types of meteorites, the chondrites, nickel iron, achondrites, and she talked about the tektites as well. And I believe she even talked about her collection, which I believe at the time totaled just about 70 pieces.
That's right, she had 70 pieces, yep.
Yeah.
So the differentiator were, 84% mantle-like Earth ones, and the nickel iron had Weidman stratum crystal pattern. The chondrites had the metal spots on them, and the tektites were where it's not really a meteorite, but it's the ground and stuff that melts and cools and freezes and then rains back down.
Yeah.
And then one of those was actually in King Tut's jewelry that she had a picture of.
Yeah, I remember she showed that specifically. And as I recall, it wasn't part of the show, but didn't they find a dagger of iron in Tut's tomb that was made from the iron of a meteorite?
I believe that was mentioned in that show too.
I seem to recall that. So
they considered that special back then.
Oh, very, very much so. And I just found the show very interesting from the standpoint of, I think the subject is interesting, but I don't know a whole lot about it. So she is quite knowledgeable, and I know that she brings her collection and a number of her pieces to a number of the programs that the club does for the course of the
And
year.
also with the nickel iron, that pattern is like a fingerprint to that comet, so they can that meteorite, so they can tell that where it came from.
Exactly. Well, next we have the third most popular show, and this one I really enjoyed doing. This was a remote recording. It was episode 128 from January of 2020. We took a trip out to Plane Wave Instruments, and we really got a comprehensive look at their whole operation. I know the CEO, Rick Hendrick, was very ingratiating. He didn't tell us there wasn't any place we couldn't go, and so we went all over.
Yeah, this actually was my favorite show. I was the one filming it, and so they were in Adrian, Michigan, and we first went to their building 35 where they had the cast granite assembly building, and Rick took us through showing us the 12.5, 14, 24.7 meters and 1 meter telescope. So the really super large telescopes and how complicated, and we looked at how they assembled the telescopes, with the mirrors and the tube assemblies. And in building 44, we went in the order of building the drive motors all the way up to the finished scopes.
And they're direct drives, which he brought up the point that there isn't a PE or backlash with a direct drive motor.
And at Ralph Emerson, the VP of Marketing and Sales, he went through building 44 with the L350s, the L500s, and the L600s. That's where they made it in that building.
Yeah, where they had the scopes that really looked like the one-arm bandits. Instead of a fork mount, it was just the one arm that it was mounted on. What I liked too when we were in the assembly building was where they actually put the scopes in to test the figure, and they had the mirror up on the ceiling, and they could really, I think, do an absolute magnificent job of making sure that everything is ground and figured exactly the way it needed to be.
Yeah, so definitely go look at episode 128 to see how these large telescopes are made.
The second most popular show is episode 51 from August of 2013, and it was the show on binocular equipment and accessories. And Ken, both you and Stephen were highlighted in that show.
So it started off with Bob Fitzgerald's parallelogram, And then we showed Greg Klineklian's BT80 Vixen 45-degree binoculars. Then I went to my Garrett pistol grip binoculars, which I consider one of my best buys ever. And then Steve, you had your wooden counterbalance
That's
for your
right.
binoculars.
Yeah, yeah. So Sky and Telescope had this thing that you could build. They just had the plans in the magazine on the website. I haven't seen it lately, but it's basically a rectangle, and there's a counterbalance that sits behind you. So this maybe 4-foot long wooden structure rests on your shoulders, and there's a weight behind you, and you put your binoculars in front, and there's a mount on that. So you get them set up.
And those two weights will counterbalance.
They counterbalance, and then you can move up, move down, and you can just turn around. And the thing is that it stabilizes everything. And I like the system. It's pretty easy. And I use the same binoculars. I move that onto a tripod, and I use it, so it depends on what you're doing. This is either really easy. The thing about a tripod, or a real tripod, is that you can have somebody else look at something that you've found in the sky. With this wooden structure, you really can't do that. You have to have somebody who's finding this stuff.
Now, Ken, you also had that observing chair, I think you demonstrated.
Actually, Steve was in that chair.
Was it
so?
Steve? Okay.
Yeah, Steve was in John Blum's bino pivoting chair, which was called the couch potato, and he had like 10 to 15 times 50 binos on that. And then I also had the zero gravity chair, which I had like a Manfrotto arm put on there.
Yeah. Okay. So I was right in remembering you were in a chair. Okay. Great. Now, the #1 show by number of views on YouTube is, gee, I'm not surprised. This is episode 2 from July of 2009. Binoculars with Ken Anderson and Steve Whitty. I don't know how you guys did it, but you did. You got the #1 and #2 shows.
On here, I did start out with this wide one, which I had at the time, and then I went to that's a 28-degree field of view. Then I went to the 7x32 Vixen Ascot 14-degree field of view. That one is both mirrors and lenses, but that one doesn't work anymore because the mirrors came unglued. And then we went to pocket binos that we both Steve and I put in our pocket.
So I had some 7x30s that I was showing, and like his, these are no longer functional. They got dropped in water. I dove into the water and I got them, and they eventually dried, but they then had a residue on the lenses. And although you could see through them, it wasn't real easy. It was very dim. So I now have some 8x30s that I like a lot.
So then I showed some mid-range 10x50s, 12x50s that had 7 degrees and 5.5 degrees. Those are good for like the Beehive, the Praesippe, the Pleiades, M13, Andromeda. And then I also had bigger ones like the 9x63 and the 15x63, which like 5-degree binoculars, which I used on the Garrett pistol grip. And then also my biggest one was the 25x100 that I used to see Mauna Kea, seeing Andromeda and Mauna Kea, and had 2 fields of view at 3.5 degrees each. So filled up the
awesome.
Bino Plus.
Of course, 100 millimeters is 4 inches, so it's like 2 4-inch telescopes.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
And it's also great for seeing Saturn and Jupiter or the Moon passing in front of the Pleiades.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah, with those kind of lenses in front of you, it's they're quite a pair. We should really call you Mr. Binocular.
Yeah, it's too bad that we don't have any. There are binocular telescopes. You can get them up to 16 inches diameter.
Oh my God!
It's just ridiculous. And they call one of the companies calls them reverse binoculars because you have your head between the 2 Newtonian telescopes. They're facing over your shoulder, and you're looking at the eyepiece down toward the mirrors.
I think that was JMI.
JMI,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you guys, this has really been a lot of fun reviewing our top 10 shows. I want to thank all of our viewers who have watched the show over the years and voted their favorites. And please visit the club website, the Ford Amateur Astronomy Club website. You can see the address down there at the bottom of your screen. And coming up next to finish off the show, as always, is Stephen with What's Up in the Night Sky.
Thanks, Don. What's up in the night sky for May 2024? The days are changing slower as we approach the solstice in June. Now, May starts with a third quarter moon on the 1st of May. New moon is the 7th, first quarter is on the 15th, and the full moon is on the 23rd. And rounding out the end of the month, we go back to a third quarter moon on the 30th. So then we have Mercury, Mars, Neptune, and Saturn, but we're really only going to talk about Mercury, Mars, and Saturn because the other planets, Jupiter and so on, have superior conjunction. You're not going to see them. Mars is in Pisces. It had superior conjunction November 18th. Saturn is in Aquarius. It had superior conjunction most recently February 28th. And Neptune, which I don't recommend you look for, had superior conjunction the 17th. These are all best, if you're going to look for them at all, at the end of the month. We're here shown on the 9th, which is the western elongation of Mercury, which I don't recommend also. Well, while we're here, let's check out the dwarf planet Ceres. Now, Ceres is in Sagittarius, which is that looks like a horse with a bow. Ceres is on the left, on the hindquarter there. You'll need binoculars to see Ceres because it's not quite naked eye visible, although it can be. And then there is the Eta Aquariids. Now there's a fish just to the left of Aquarius who's pouring water. There's a fish who's pointing right at the radiant of the Eta Aquariid meteor shower. So that's the radiant. The meteors will appear to be coming from that point in the sky. This point in the sky doesn't have to be visible in order for you to see it, to see meteors. And the best thing to use to see a meteor shower is, as always, your eyeballs. In the southern hemisphere, there can be 60 meteors an hour. In the northern hemisphere, only 30, so it's a little bit better in the southern hemisphere. It is produced by the dust particles of Comet Halley, which we just heard about a little bit. The shower runs from April 19th, so already, to May 28th, which is like all month. It peaks this year on the night of May 6th and the morning of May 7th, but it's better after midnight, so May 7th, the morning. The nearly new moon means that you've got dark skies for what should be a great show. Best viewing from a dark location, again after midnight. Meteors radiate as shown, but they can appear anywhere in the sky. Don't forget to dress warm. And that is what's up in the night sky for May 2024. Remember, we don't charge money for this show, but we may tax your brain.